What's up? What's up, everybody? How are we doing today? Welcome back to another weekly live stream here on Suns Digest. I'm your host, Bruce Veliz, and in today's weekly live stream, we're going to dive in and explore the Summer League as the Phoenix Suns have not wrapped up their Summer League as they still have a consolation game to play, but have played all four of their scheduled contests so far that we have seen. And we're going to dive in and explore what really stood out from the Summer League from the Phoenix Suns and what could really translate for the team going into next season. But not only just that, what really was key from watching these games. So I'm excited to have all of you guys here in the stream today. Apologies for no stream last week as I was busy, but obviously this week we're kicking it off and having some good old fun with everyone here, breaking down the Suns and looking at the Summer League here today. I do want to get into some sort of stuff here before we dive into the stream. I know there's been a lot of discussion on social media today revolving around the Suns. I am not going to be discussing and talking about that type of stuff here on the channel today, and I just want to get that clarified before we dive into everything. We're going to be talking about this team and the new direction that they are heading into within this new regime, and I think that that's something to be more inspired and to be something to be actually actively talking about than looking at the past. So in today's episode, like I mentioned, as you can see in the thumbnail, we had some great performances from some players over this stretch, even though the Suns unfortunately did not have the best performance with a record, as they did fail to really represent any winning in the Summer League. They only won their first game versus the Washington Wizards and then lost 3 straight to the Atlanta Hawks, Sacramento Kings, and then Minnesota Timberwolves. But the Timberwolves, Kings, and Hawks are all some top teams in this Summer League here, so it is important to know at least that the Suns gave at least some good competition to some teams that actually were actively representing the Summer League in a bright light. And with those kind of performances, we did see some breakout performances from guys on this roster. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. But ultimately, I want to dive in and kind of start off and talk about one of the main guys in the thumbnail, and that is Oso Ighodaro, as he ultimately, I think, shocked a lot of people with this Summer League performances in the over the last couple stretches here for the Phoenix Suns. Even in yesterday's game versus the Minnesota Timberwolves, he was very active in representing a little bit of a new role that we might be seeing within this Suns team, and something that we have noticed within not only the trades the team has made, but also the lineups they have run within the Summer League, is that there is a clear representation and identity of what Jordan Ott's system may look like for the Phoenix Suns. And I think it's going to be some sort of combination of this double big lineup and double guard lineup, similar to how the Cleveland Cavaliers used to run, where he was the assistant coach last season. And we've already got some key inklings with that, with Booker and Jalen Green being in that lineup. But I think Oso Ighodaro, a lot of people were thinking with Nick Richards, Malawach, and Mark Williams that he might not have a big of a role, including myself. But what we saw within the Summer League is that he can play a little bit of that power forward position and actually be pretty solid running that point forward position. There were multiple times where Oso Ighodaro was running that offense and actively getting involved in the pick and roll and was doing pretty solid. Ultimate times as well where he was attacking downhill, going to the basket, having some nice finishes at the basket as well. And even in that game versus the Timberwolves, had a nice little communication pass with Ryan Dunn where he was underneath the basket, getting a nice little layup, building upon that chemistry. And I do think we're going to see Oso Ighodaro in this Suns rotation, depending on the lineup that the Suns are running, playing that 4 and 5 within this team off the bench here, maybe even starting within a guy in Mark Williams, but that is something we can discuss a little bit later. But I do think a guy in Oso Ighodaro kind of proved his worth within this Summer League here, that a lot of people were kind of discounting this going into this season, which I really liked for the big man here. Once again, like I mentioned, played a pretty solid offensive role, kind of taking control for the Phoenix Suns, and kind of being one of those veterans. And even though within this roster, he's most likely going to be a rotational piece within this Suns team, I do think that shows some promise for him being able to play off ball within this rotation. Not to mention that the guy has put on some pounds and actually looks pretty solid down low in the paint, grabbing some rebounds, and that was something that was a little bit of a misfactor with Oso Ighodaro last season. We did see him get implemented with Mason Plumlee again taken out of the end of last season, and he was able to kind of get some rebounds, but I do think him putting on that size is going to ultimately make him stronger down low in the paint, to be able to feel more comfortable playing that center position for the Suns and being more of a paint beast and off the glass beast, which is going to be very effective for the Suns running that fast transition and keeping up that pace that they want to play. As we saw it with DeMarre Carroll in the Summer League, I do think we're going to see that translate with Jordan Ott as well. So Oso Ighodaro, one of the guys that really impressed me. The other sophomore that was on this team was Ryan Dunn, who had some great performance as well. In my personal opinion, he looked more comfortable shooting the three-point shot. He had a lot of opportunities where he was wide open, and the jump shot just looked more fluid with him taking those opportunities in the Summer League. Not to mention, he was also attacking downhill very aggressively within this Phoenix Suns rotation and was able to command some opportunities, kind of running some point wing for this Suns unit. And I really liked what he was able to do with this Suns squad, not only on the ball, but off the ball, offensively and defensively. He did have a little bit of a scary fall in the game yesterday, but did play on that, and it was reported after that he was going to be A-OK, which was good for Suns fans. But Dunn, I think, could see a little bit of improvement within this Suns rotation. Obviously, with Jordan not coming in and not having Mike Budenholzer, hindering his minutes, I do think we could see the development of Ryan Dunn kind of soar within this Suns rotation through this next season, as both him and Oso Ighodaro are showing promising signs so far through Summer League. And it is Summer League. These guys did play in the NBA, so they should look good. They should look experienced, right? They should not look bad. But all signs are pointing towards them looking to be heading into that promising direction of running this youth movement, which I really do like having those guys, and Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro. So I really like that with the Phoenix Suns going into their next opportunities, going into the preseason, and how they kind of reshape this roster. So people have talked about Ryan Dunn playing that power forward position, starting alongside Dillon Brooks. I don't necessarily know if that's the best move. I think, personally, in my opinion, with how the roster is kind of constructed, I would go the double big lineup and have Ryan Dunn come off the bench and have be one of those top defensive players for the Suns there in that secondary unit, and could still even finish out games depending on how the Suns do look down the stretch. But that's where I kind of stand with things, where I do think potentially starting a lineup of Booker, Green, Brooks, Oso, and Mark Williams, with having Ryan Dunn being that kind of six-man off the bench here to start off the season, could look a little bit better in the rotation types of things, with helping the Suns with having some size adjustments as well. And that's something we can kind of keep an eye on when discussing looking further into the season, looking at the roster construction. But ultimately, like I said, I do like the additions of Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro in their performances so far within the Summer League, and how they can add to this Suns actual roster now going into training camp. Now, next, we could talk about the other players as well, the rookies, Kama Malawach, Kobe Brea, and Rasheer Fleming. We'll start off with Rasheer Fleming because he got, unfortunately, the least amount of time out of all these guys, as he was out for the first two games, but was able to suit up with versus the Kings and versus the Timberwolves. In the Kings game, looked a little bit lost on the defensive end, but obviously was trying to kind of figure out his role and where he was going to play within this Suns Summer League, as already those guys had built some chemistry, and he was kind of just trying to figure out where he could add it to make a difference within this Suns roster. He did have a nice little turnaround jumper from the mid-range, which I did really like to see from Rasheer Fleming, and we saw in the second game he got a little bit more comfortable hitting some more threes and working once again with Oso Ighodaro, where he was running that point forward position, where Rasheer Fleming was able to get some nice cutting action, working the back door, and able to get some nice layups with the Suns in transition, their sets. Not to mention, the Suns also had some great performances from Rasheer Fleming on the defensive end with his high motor and high energy with his long frame, where he does look like he could present himself to be a solid potential power forward, where the Suns are kind of questioning who's going to be that true identity power forward for this team down the line. I think a guy in Rasheer Fleming could eventually grow to be that piece as a 3-and-D guy for the Phoenix Suns, and I think that will definitely translate in the next couple of seasons. He's a little bit more of a guy that I think with the Suns rotation now could be competing with Nigel Hayes-Davis for those backup 4 minutes, but I do think because he is a rookie, we'll see a little bit more of the leeway compared to Hayes-Davis with this team going into that retool direction. Then Malawach, we'll dive into him. Obviously, had his really bright spots where he was dunking on people, getting some big blocks, hitting some cool threes, doing all that, but also had his moments where you could see he was a raw prospect and obviously was going to take some time to develop. And with realizing that Malawach was going to be the 10th overall pick, you had to know that coming with the Duke prospect, right? We knew that he wasn't going to come and cement himself and immediately change the game and turn himself into a top 5 big once he implanted himself, but he has the potential to be that big in 2 to 3 seasons. And that's how the Suns have this vision for the next couple of years, is kind of being in this limbo for maybe this season, maybe next year, just trying to reshuffle the deck and refix the cards so that when these rookie contracts actually excel and actually develop and can, be worthy of these long-term extensions that they can get out there, they can build the right core and roster around them before they hit that point so they can go out and try to win a championship. And I do think a guy like Malawach can be one of those pieces down the line. There were multiple times people said during the Summer League, if you listen to the broadcast, that a lot of people in the scouts are saying that a guy in Malawach is being compared to a guy like Joel Embiid, someone who picked up the game of basketball, obviously a little bit later in life, and is, another a big coming from Africa that, is having to translate to the game and is adjusting from playing over there to then playing in college and now playing to the NBA. And people say that a guy in Malawach is, at this point, has better skills than Joel Embiid did. And obviously Embiid went through those injuries and stuff like that, so you're hoping that's not the case for Malawach. But if he doesn't have those injuries and you would just expect a guy to potentially be, if not Joel Embiid, I'm not expecting him to be him, but have the effect of Joel Embiid, that could be absolutely dramatic. And I think even if he had a third of an effect of Joel Embiid ultimately, and that was his production, that could even be instrumental for the Phoenix Suns and really shaking up this core and finding a trend, an actual foundation building block at the center position, something that they wanted to have with DeAndre but weren't able to solidify down the line. And now you can get that in a guy in Malawach who not only can be that interior presence, obviously has that motor, has that high work, has that drive from what we've seen so far with him talking about down in the draft and stuff like that, about what he wants to represent coming over into the NBA. But not only just that, his ability to potentially stretch out the floor and be that three-point shooter. I think that could be very effective for the Phoenix Suns down the line if they continue to build on that. Right now, like I mentioned, I don't think he's going to come into the NBA this season and be a top 10 big and kind of shake the world, but I do think he's going to show spurts, growth, development, improve, that he has those building blocks and actual fundamental pieces to transition into being one of those top tier bigs. And I think we're going to see that continue this season with a guy in Malawach. And then lastly, talking about Kobe Brea, the lights out shooter from Kentucky. I already wrote an article about this on Bright Side of the Sun, so definitely go check that out if you have not already. But I will say that I compared him to a guy in Grayson Allen, where I know a lot of people have said, oh, he's Devin Booker. I don't think we can reach that high of an expectation just yet, but he does mirror his game of a guy in Devin Booker. Obviously went to Kentucky, is an alum of the same college, and plays a very similar play style. I would say that he's more effective from three-point range than Devin Booker was coming out of college, and I do think that a guy in Brea can be that kind of Grayson Allen replacement down the line. Maybe this season, maybe next season, depending on what this roster really does look like. He's currently on a two-way deal, but you can clearly see the explosiveness from his three-point shot. Not only can he score off the dribble, he can create his own shots from the mid-range. He's a three-level scorer, cutting to the basket, getting dunks, being able to hit multiple shots, being contested from three-point range, moving, being able to hit stationary, catch and shoot three-point opportunities. This is what you want to see out of a guy in Kobe Brea, and I think if he picks up all the other tools, right, he's a solid POA defender on the attack, but if he could work transition defense, right, can help on the back cuts, not get completely lost on that side of the ball, and he can pick up, the ability to be a solid ball handler, be able to have the instinct to be aggressive on the defensive end, attack for rebounds, which he's already shown kind of so far. I do think a guy in Kobe Brea could be that Grayson Allen replacement, and maybe that's this season at the middle of the year where there's not really high expectations and the Suns' record isn't that great, and they look to go and add a guy in Kobe Brea. Maybe it's next off season. Maybe it is this off season, and they move off Grayson Allen. The options are openly endless for the Phoenix Suns. But in my opinion, they have the outlines of some guys that can actually mold to be pretty solid rotational players, if not guys that could be part of a solid committee around Devin Booker to help change his culture and identity. And the best part is they're all on rookie scale deals. Mark Williams, who we just traded for, is still on a rookie scale deal. And even though he'll have to be extended after this season, he at least is on a rookie scale deal for this season. So you get to still see that development and see how much he's really worth. Milo Watch is locked up for 3 years. Brea is on a two-way deal, and once you get him converted to a standard deal, you'll be fine with that. Gillespie's on a cheap contract. Rasheer Fleming's on a rookie scale deal, right? All these guys, or even Nigel Hayes-Davis is on a veteran minimum contract. And the guys that are on one-year deals, if you don't bring them back, you then have another opportunity next free agency to then add on and bring them in. And I know that the Bradley Beal buyout has now opened a lot of money for us in free agency and a lot of options for us to make trades. I don't necessarily think we're going to see all of that take into effect this offseason, but I think going into trade deadline, depending on how this team looks, we could see some shakeups coming down the line. We could also see some shakeups with this roster going into next season, with them trying to set more salary to have the options to bring in another big-time contract. All the options basically remain open for the Phoenix Suns here. So that's where I stand with that. Lastly, when looking at the Summer League, there have been some other names that have been talked about. Yuri Collins, Boogie Ellis. I believe those are really the only other two. Moses Wood, who was a factor last year. He looks like he'd be a G League guy. Yuri Collins had some, tweets from me saying he could be a nice playmaker for the Valley Suns. Then he had some opportunities where he was losing having some bad turnovers and not being able to handle the ball. I do think for the Valley Suns, he could be a solid point guard still, and I think that wouldn't be too bad, specifically with them not having Ty Washington signed yet. That's not going to be the case. Having another point guard like that could be beneficial. And then Boogie Ellis, pretty solid off the ball scorer, catch and shoot guy, can create his own shot. You saw him yesterday light up the Timberwolves early on in the game and get 15 points early on in halftime. I do think he could be another solid scorer for the Valley Suns, and I wouldn't be shocked if either of them are there as well. But let's look at the chat. Let's see what you guys have to say. Big Merck's here. What's up? How you doing? He said he's cool. Oh. Glad Beal's gone. A lot of people are. What's up, Suns? Beal was a huge W. What's up, Cramp? How we doing? Maybe another PG now with roster space. That's what I wrote about, too. The guys that I think could be potential assets, DeLon Wright. Now, I'm going to say this now. Gambo has shut down CP3, Westbrook, Ben Simmons, Malcolm Brogdon, and I think that's it. So if you want to say any of those names, they're not happening because Gambo shut them down. Maybe another PG. DeLon Wright could make sense. Maybe not if they aren't going to be winning, but I do think he's another option for the Suns. Delano Banton is another one, a younger player. And then Amir Coffey is a wing that I think they could potentially get. Big Merc, I like your thoughts. Oso is okay in my book. Yeah, he looked really good in the Summer League. What's up, everyone? I hope the offense is fat-paced to hide the fact that we don't have a true point guard. Yeah, I hope so, too, and I think that we are going to see that, Saul. We saw in the Summer League, I don't know if you watched the games, but it was a very high, fast-paced team. They were, not really getting into sets and, keeping that intensity up, which I really liked. And that was with Damari Carroll. So he's going to be one of the assistants, so I do think that's kind of resemblant of what we could see going into this season. Exactly. And I think a lot of people were mad about Malawach's development, but as well because of some of the key mistakes of him not being able to catch the ball or, him, having some fumble plays. But like you mentioned, he didn't have a true point guard, and I think it's going to look a lot different with Colin Westby and Devin Booker, maybe even another point guard within the roster as well. I don't know if Bol is coming back. I don't think so. I don't think Iso Ball is going to be a part. I like Chris Boucher too. He's someone I think they could go out and get as a bench role player as a 4, but I also don't necessarily know what they can, trade. You trading Royce for picks and then signing Boucher, maybe. I liked Frank too. He was good, and I think Nigel Hayes-Davis is going to be Frank's going to be a big fan of Nigel playing here as well because they're friends from Wisconsin, and I think maybe you'll see some Frank Tank at the games watching Nigel. That's what I'm saying. we gotta wait for Malawach to continue to grow Dagoon. I appreciate that. I think we just gotta wait. And no one likes Point Book. I'm hoping Gillespie does good. No, I think Nigel Hayes-Davis could be pretty solid. I know from the Celtics' perspective, in 2021 they looked at him, and in 2025 they also looked at him. So he was someone that was getting a eye on the radar from multiple teams. I know Brendon Kleen, who was on the show 2 weeks ago, I think at this point, also said that the Suns were looking at him last year. So he could be someone that the Suns do run into this rotation. Another, 3-and-D guy, had some success over in the Euro League. Going to be, a pretty effective defender. Is going to come in with a lot of heart, energy, and hustle because he wants to, prove that he does belong in the NBA. So I think if you're the Suns, this is someone that kind of fits into that culture. And once again, I mentioned this before here on the channel, but I'll harp on it again. I think the Suns are trying to get these kind of like mentors, and even if they're not, replacements down the line, they're getting players that have they're getting young players, but also veterans that have the similar characteristics and makeup of being in the NBA. So they have an understanding of what it really takes to, I guess, blossom to turn into that role player, right? You have Rasheer Fleming and Nigel Hayes-Davis. You have Malawach and Mark Williams. You have Brea with Booker and Grayson Allen. You have Ryan Dunn with Dylan Brooks. I mentioned maybe CP with Colin Gillespie, but obviously it doesn't seem like Chris Paul is going to be coming, right? You have those guys that, are veterans that, are solid enough and are going to be fighting for these roles and going to be continuing to play hard. But you also have those young guys that see the representation of what they can be ultimately in the league, potentially even better if they rise to those expectations. And just getting that experience, I think, is just been beneficial. And you look at teams across the league, right? Look at the Rockets. A couple seasons ago when they had cap space, they signed Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks. And a lot of people were like, why are they doing that? Why are they wasting their money on guys that aren't going to, help them move the needle? $50 million for Fred VanVleet is absolutely insane, right? But as you can clearly see, those veterans set a foundation, and they had the young guys around them to, build. And once they kind of soared past and kind of took these leaps to where the Rockets are now the 2 seed, they now have the flexibility to use a Dylan Brooks in a trade for Kevin Durant, have the option to use a Fred VanVleet, or decline his player option and restructure his deal so that you can make something more affordable for your team, so you can also make more moves down the line. And if you look across the league, a lot of other teams are kind of seeing this model and really resembling it, right? The Pistons kind of dabbled in it a little bit, going and getting Tobias Harris and stuff like that. Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, Simone Fontecchio. Now they've kind of transitioned out of it, but they kind of dibbled into it. You look at the Wizards. The Wizards obviously went and got Marcus Smart, Chris Middleton, and all these veterans, and now they have a young squad, and we'll see what this Wizards team can really turn into it, and I think they're kind of following in the similar footsteps. And then also, if you look at the Blazers, they just went and brought back Damian Lillard. They have Drew Holiday. They have Jeremy Grant. But they also have young guys like Scoot Henderson, Shaedon Sharpe. You can even consider, Denny Abida still kind of like a middling to young player. Toumani Camara, Donovan Clingan. So I do think the kind of new mold, especially with this new CBA, is to either go all in with an all-in squad, similar to how the Celtics did a couple years ago, or now you see the Nuggets, the Rockets, some of these teams the Clippers are really stacking up in the West, or it's to build the way of the Pacers, the Thunder, where you have, that 1 or 2 superstar, but you have those role players or those veterans around you that can kind of help mold your team and kind of push you into that new atmosphere. And then once you get into that, then you have the plausibility to use some of those contracts to make more trades down the line and get another superstar, adding like a Kevin Durant. Because the thing is the Suns, even though they are a smaller market, they're a nice area. Who doesn't want to live in the Valley during the coldest part of the year, where it's 70, 80, 90 degrees when it's January and February? That's awesome compared to living in Milwaukee, Chicago, Boston, etc. And obviously for these NBA players, the worst part about living in Phoenix is the summertime. But guess what? If you're in the NBA, you don't have to live all year round in the summertime's the off season. So you can be on vacations. You can be in other areas training. You don't have to be in the Phoenix area. Not to mention that Phoenix is next to Vegas, right next to California. It's in a great spot. And for players to see Devin Booker taking this loyalty and sticking with this team, they already saw Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal try to go and win there. And I'm sure that it's kind of the new identity the Phoenix Suns want to bring in, is kind of resetting this team now, trying to see if any of these pieces can stick and be a part of this long-term development for Devin Booker. And then whatever doesn't really pan out with this team, they're ultimately going to take and move off of so that they can go and put a championship team around him. And I think that's what we're going to see in this next 1 to 2 seasons, seeing a lot of these young players have those blossomings and try to see who can really stand out. And then by year 3, 4 of this retool, we will see where those cards really stack. Do they have those young assets to where they can extend them and have that competitive team and only need to make smaller moves around the edges? Or do they need to go out and get one more star to really put them over the top, and they can go out and do that because they have the tradable contracts or they have the young assets that teams are interested in to go out and acquire? I don't know if Book is playing 2-3. I would think Book is going to be playing 1. I think the lineup is going to be Booker, Green, Brooks, Oso, Williams. That would be my starting 5 that I would say right now. And then off the bench, you have Colin Gillespie, Grayson Allen, Ryan Dunn, Rasheer Fleming / Nigel Hayes-Davis, and then you have Kaman Malawach. And then your kind of first rotation would obviously be inserting Ryan Dunn into the lineup. You then could take out Mark Williams and slot Oso to the 5 and go a little bit smaller. You could put Dunn and Malawach in together and still have that double big lineup with still having Dunn still presenting himself. That's something I think that we could kind of look at. It also all depends, right? Because that's Royce is still on the team. Where's Royce's role, right? Like there's so many options with what this team can do with their roster spots that we're just going to have to wait and see what ultimately does present itself out there. There was a little bit of a stall with the Summer League because obviously teams are trying to figure out who is really standing out with their squad and who's really blossoming, and they need to go make other moves. And I think after this Summer League, following this weekend, we're going to see some more moves transpire going into next week, and that's really going to show and kind of prove to the Suns what they really do have. And Gamble will let us know, if Grayson and Royce are kind of stuck here or what this team's final product is really going to be. And then once we see that, that's when we can really assume and kind of understand what this rotation is truly going to be for the Suns. Feel bad for Dame, though, that yeeted him real quick. Well, I mean, I don't really feel bad for him because he played in Portland his whole career. He loved playing there. They traded him to Milwaukee to try to win a championship. That ultimately failed and wasn't going to happen with Dame being on that team. So then they just got Dame back and still got Drew back. I think it's pretty nice for them. Well, that's also because Dame got the full buyout, but also Dame's going to his hometown team, right? To get Bradley Beal bought out, the Suns would have given him his full money, which would have been a little bit more, but they couldn't because of how the other deals that they waived from Nazir Little and AJ Liddell were from last year. I don't see Quentin Grimes. They're not going to get. See, this is where I would disagree. Can't depend on Colin as a true PG. I would disagree on that because there were multiple times last year where you saw Colin Gillespie, where he was on a two-way deal, mind you, right? A two-way contract where no one had any expectations for Colin Gillespie. Unless you're a Villanova super fan, you're a part Nuggets / Suns fan, you saw Colin Gillespie sign. And unless you're a basketball sicko or paying attention, you're just going to say, oh, this is another two-way guy, right? And he clearly proved that was not the case. Not only just in his experience playing with the Valley Suns, but for the fact that he was given these opportunities within the real roster. And I think that Clippers game where he really emerged is that clear sign of him being that true backup point guard. And there were multiple times, and I always point to this part of the season when I argue the Suns because it's the part that I have the most connection to, because In March, the Suns went on a huge win streak, and all of us were buying back in, saying they can make the play-in. Here's this little stretch. KD's healthy. Booker's back. Let's go and let's make this 8th seed. And everyone was bought back in. They were 4, 5, 6 wins in a row, something like that. I think it was 3, 4 wins in a row. And then all of a sudden, with Colin Gillespie in this lineup, playing with Devin Booker, looking very solid, with no Grayson Allen and no Bradley Beal because they're hurt, when they come back, because Bud has to give them minutes, the Suns start struggling. I think Colin Gillespie is a better fit next to Devin Booker than both of those players. I think Jalen Green is a better fit next to Devin Booker than both of those players. And it's all for what they can bring to the state of basketball, right? Devin Booker, if he's playing that point guard position, is going to be playing, distributing the ball, and looking for people either cutting to the basket, setting him picks, and trying to get him involved in that offense to where he can generate multiple looks to either cutting guys to get either layups or then to where he can show that out to guys on the perimeter like Bradley Beal or Grayson Allen. But if you have Bradley Beal and Grayson Allen both sitting on the corners or the elbows of both of those, just sitting at the three-point line, not moving, well, guess what? Now both of their opponents are just stuck on the corner, focus on them, going, yeah, well, if Devin Booker gets any opportunity, he's going to try and shoot to them. So all I have to do is stick my man. As long as I stick my man, they're not getting the ball, or if they do, they're taking a bad generated shot on a weakly anticipated three that I'm heavily guarding, and it's not going to go in. At least with Colin Gillespie, we have the option for him to play on or off the ball, which you can't really say. I mean, you can kind of say that with Bradley Beal, but I wouldn't really say with Grayson Allen. And you can say with Colin Gillespie that his ability to drive and allow Devin Booker to play off the ball is going to allow them to create more opportunities. So in my ultimate opinion, I would agree that they do need a vet at the position as well to help the young guys, and that I can agree on, right? But I do think that Colin Gillespie this season has the opportunity to insert himself into this rotation as a key backup point guard and someone that you could see making $7-8 million next season on a $2 or $3 million deal with this team because of the role that he's presented himself. And I think that's pretty evident from what we've seen so far. I could be wrong, and I'm willing to eat my words if I am, but that's what I'm saying. No, and I agree with you. This part I can agree, and that's where I think we are right on. Is I'm a big fan as well, and I do think we need more than one point guard. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that adding a guy, even Morris, wouldn't be bad. That's why I think a guy like Delano Banton would be pretty solid because he's a little bit younger. Even though he's not a veteran point guard, he's someone where I don't think he's going to eat into Colin Gillespie's minutes as much. I think he's just going to be viewed as a tertiary option, or maybe DeLon Wright, who could be viewed as more of a defensive, scrappy type point guard. And even though he is, that veteran and could kind of get in and to interfere with Colin's minutes a little bit, I do think he presents a little bit of a different role where they would go to Colin first over DeLon Wright with him, being that veteran presence. He's not competing for, a role. He is competing for a role, but, he's not fighting for his next contract. He is, but you know what I'm saying. Like, Colin Gillespie has more in it out there to try to prove himself than a guy in DeLon Wright who's already had his opportunities across the NBA. So I do believe a guy in Colin Gillespie, in my opinion, would still get that leeway and the opportunities. But if he was struggling offensively or got into some foul trouble, wasn't hitting his shots, then maybe the Suns could lean into a guy in DeLon Wright to maybe switch that up. We should have grabbed up Javon. I love Javon, man. I would have loved to have him back. That is someone that I was talking about even last season, if you dive back into the videos, as a possible trade candidate. And his option got picked up by the Bulls at $6 million. I honestly wouldn't be shocked either if he was an option that they kind of considered, right? Like, he would have to be a trade candidate. But now that the Suns are below the first and the second apron, they essentially can acquire more money in a deal or send out more money in a deal. And I do believe the Bulls are in the same scenario. So, retrospectively, the Suns could do a Nick Richards for Javon Carter deal in which they take back $1 extra million, or they could do a Royce O'Neal for Javon Carter deal in which they are sending out $3 more million and taking back less money. Obviously, you can kind of pick your poison with that. I don't necessarily know if the Bulls would do those deals. I feel like Javon Carter for Nick Richards makes a little bit more sense for both aspects, just because the Bulls have still some uncertainty with Nikola Vucevic in their front court. Maybe they do take a flyer on Richards and could potentially flip him down the line to another playoff team at the deadline. And if the Suns don't want to have that logjam at center with him, Oso, Malawach, and Williams, could view adding a guy like Javon Carter to that rotation. A guy in Royce O'Neal also could be very beneficial for a team as well in the Bulls, depending on what they want to do with Patrick Williams. But I ultimately do think with the Bulls maybe kind of resetting and getting a little bit younger, a guy like Royce O'Neal, who's also, I believe, on 2 more years on his deal, I don't think is mainly an ideal pickup for them. Maybe they'd have to have some picks attached, which gets a little bit confusing for the Suns. So I feel like Richards for Javon Carter would make more sense, and you're saying fingers crossed. I mean, honestly, that out of the options that I mentioned, right? Oh, you said who would I said Coffee, DeLon Wright, and Banton. That's who I said. And I know you said up here as well, Saul. I liked you, right? I wanted him last year as well. Him or ultimately Javon Carter, I think, are kind of the best 2 picks. Amir Coffee is very solid as well, but he's more of a combo wing, more of a 2-3, which I think kind of conflicts with, once again, Royce O'Neal's position. Even though he kind of plays that 3-4, he does kind of play that combo wing for the Suns. So I think they'd have to move off Royce O'Neal to kind of pursue Amir Coffee. There's also that kind of Brooks, Dunn, Coffee, Grayson now kind of like weird log jam. So that makes it a little bit weird. So I do think out of those guys, Banton would probably be the 4th, probably listed, but I do think could make sense. Then I think Coffee is probably 3rd, just because I would like him, but I just don't necessarily know if the fit is there. And then I'll go DeLon Wright, because he is ultimately my favorite out of the free agency acquisitions. But then I think Dagoon presented ultimately here in this stream here my favorite ultimate person, which is Javon Carter, because bringing him back to the Valley, a solid, once again, scrappy point guard, someone who could hold that role, I think kind of fits that notion as well that you said, Saul, here earlier in the chat, of getting that veteran point guard. A guy like him could be very valuable for the Phoenix Suns, playing in that backup position here, and kind of, I guess, like splitting those minutes with Colin, but ultimately, like I said, I don't think taking too much away from Colin Gillespie and ultimately Dagoon. I think I'm gonna, as long as you don't care, I think I might have to throw that up on the bright side of the sun. I'll definitely give you credits for that, but we'll definitely catch an eye for that, because that was a very, very good a trade idea and something that ultimately I do like. And then King Nacho, trade for Lonzo Ball. I don't think Lonzo is going to be acquirable, because he was just traded to the Cavs just a couple weeks ago, or weeks ago at this point. So yeah, with him kind of not being there, that'd be kind of tough. Yeah, loving Carter as well from Saul. So yeah, a lot of big fans of Javon Carter. That's someone that would be welcomed, it seems like, with open arms back here in the Valley. And once again, someone that I definitely would not be complaining about. But as we all know, Phoenix Suns Summer League didn't go as high as expected, as we did see, in my opinion. But there were still some bright flashes from Oso Guidaro, Ryan Dunn, Rasheer Fleming, Kobe Brea, Kama Malawach, Yuri Collins, and even Boogie Ellis at some point here, who was in the chat as I look down below. Big Merc, Josh Crampton, Saul H. Soto, King Nacho, Dagoon. You guys are absolutely amazing here, being here in the chat, and just absolutely making it a good time here on a Thursday afternoon / evening over here on the East Coast. And I can't do it without you guys, making some good old fun time and bringing up some good conversations and questions. So I really do appreciate it. Dagoon says, do it. I got you, Dagoon. I'll give you a big shout out over there on Brightside as well. So make sure to check that out, coming in your inbox potentially over the weekend as well for you guys. But once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in, hanging out here, being in this stream. As you know, we usually go live every Thursday evening / afternoon at this specific time. Depends on the time as well with some guests, as we do have to change it. This week there was no guest. We'll have to keep an eye out if any more guests do come in on the future. But I've had the pleasure of speaking to some great guests already. So if I can't find any more, I'm sure some of them would love to cop back on the show, which would be an absolute pleasure to dive back in and break down this Suns off season. But once again, I really do appreciate all the love and support from you guys here in this live stream. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to check out the videos here on the channel, as we do upload news whenever stuff does come out. So if you want to stay up to date, that will definitely be the place to check it all out. But once again, thank you guys. Have a great rest of your night, and go Phoenix Suns.